Hello, I'm Aelita, your guide to the future. Welcome to the International Symposium Creating the Future at the National Center, Russia. I'm happy to welcome you at this wonderful event. I'm sure that will be an interesting journey to the world of ideas and new opportunities. Shall we start? Hello, dear friends, colleagues. We are starting our session and it seems to be very interesting. First of all, I'd like to introduce our guest to you. So here we have a sci fiction writer, Roberto Quaglia, the representative of the Association of Science Fiction of the city of Chengdu, Yao Xue, the architect and engineer, James Lowe, Vice President of Sberbank, Albert Efimov, the futurist Pereslegin Sergey, and in the first row, the head of the Association of Berloga Cyber Platform, Alexei Fedoseev. Dear friends, today's topic is science fiction as a driver of development, the creation of new fantastic worlds and data, and here is some information for you. So first I'll start with a question. Do you know any book or movie that is very popular among our people, created in our country in the last 30 years, describing the wonderful future of Russia? So I can see that not many of you raised their hands, but I'd like to remind you that there were many of such examples in the Soviet Union. So the first is Moscow Cassiopeia, the Guests from the Future, Through Troubles to Stars, and others. Of course, though there were some problems in these films, they were about the positive traits of the souls of the people. So we are just starting to see such phenomenon as the Chinese fantasy and science fiction, Luci's Sin, the three-body problem, the Wandering Earth, the film which raised $700 million and became as popular as one of the blockbusters of Hollywood. What is this? Is it the consequence of Chinese breakthrough, or is this a manageable process? What kind of process is this? This is something that's stimulating Chinese youth to do science and to be positive about the future. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the possibility, the opportunity of today's science fiction, which is today describing only apocalyptic future, if it is able to speak about some positive agenda for tomorrow, if it is able to come up with some socially positive ideas, and if we can manage this process. But let's start from the history of this question. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Pereslegin with the following question. So, Sergey, as for the phenomenon of Soviet science fiction, we know that the technological progress in the USSR was one of the integral parts of the bright tomorrow. How the Soviet science fiction that described this bright future, if it was created on the command of the state, of the government, or no. So I think that I should not have prepared to this topic, and I will answer your questions in this case. So the most funny in this situation, and the tragically funny, is that the Soviet science fiction, nobody tried to manage it, and still it wasn't self-governing system. And I have a very good report that I present from time to time, which was about the 1920s, British detective against Soviet science fiction. And it is also about the one of the most sophisticated phenomena of the 20s, which was about the interaction and counteraction of these two genres. And the British, we were were making it not on the command of the state, but they got together, they created this club of a detective. It was working as a single unit, and they needed to explain to the people they did not need to act. They needed to leave it as it is. In the Soviet Union, the science fiction was very energetic, and it was based on differences, on development, on transformation of classic science, but there were no system of control from the state, from the government, and every was trying to solve his or her own problem, and in fact, we were trying to create the characters that were acting on their own. In the 60s, the situation was getting worse. So if talking about the exploit of the science fiction of the Soviet times, they were alone on this journey, and they had no support from anybody on this way. So the second point that I would like to highlight is that science fiction is not the driver of development. This is one of the mistakes, one of the rigid mistakes of the people who work after this, means in the consequence of this. Same for China. Now China has its own science fiction, such as Phenomenon, as latest seen, the writer, and somebody brought to the Communist Party of China the information that the most successful innovators are the people who read fantasy books in their childhood. So science fiction is necessary for innovation. So, but the driver for development is not fantasy books or science fiction, but the kids who read these books. That this is important, principally changing the whole situation for their development. I would also like to tell you about the three generations of the Soviet times. In the Soviet times, we had a number of problems, and when I'm asked about these times, I quote Strugatsky brothers, the picnic on the sideline, and they were saying that our town has always been a hole in our country, but for some time it was a hole to the future. So in the Soviet times, there were three generations of people who were discussing the future, but not the today's reality. The first was the generation of revolutions, and Aelita that we saw here, that I'm laughing at, is from that time, because somebody decided to use the approach of the 20s of the last century, but this was the generation that was discussing the space and the future revolution. And they were also discussing non-classic science. This was a breakthrough of science in the 60s. It's connected with this phenomenon. The people who lived in non-classic world from the very beginning, from birth. So this is the generation which died during the war. Then there was another generation, and then our generation, the third one, those who were born in the 60s. So we are the grandchildren of the first generation of the revolution. If for them future was in revolution, for us the future was in the space, and this was our fantasy. So now there is the third generation. So each time there is one generation that is lost. So the idea is taken from grandparents to grandkids. And the third idea that I would like to mention is the following: saying that science fictions don't deal with the development means that the science fiction is not about the future. And we could say, read not fantasy books, but detectives. Detective stories are about the future. The problem is that science fictions, with just a few exclusions that I could name, which are Lem, which are Winch, which are Simmons, Stevenson, Mjemel, and the sixth is Lafixson. So six persons who dealt with the problems of the future, not the problems of today. They have always been difficult to read, and even Lem was talking about Solaris. that I wrote a book that I love but I don't understand. All others were always into the problems of today. They were trying to concentrate it to make it more tense, and they were trying to change the world of today to make this problem more important, and they created some kind of environment where they were trying to solve this problem, and the solution that they were about to take seemed very important. Of course, there will no be such setting that they created, but they proved that such solution existed. At the same time, science fiction as maths works not with the actual world but some models that could not exist. But same as for mathematic models, the fantastic worlds tell us a lot about our reality. So what else can I tell here? When you deal with science fiction about the future, you need to understand that it's impossible to capture anything, but you can try to catch. And after that, you will work on it. And as for everything that has been written, we should be very attentive to the details, but not to believe what has been written in this book. Now, the problem is the following. When I say that there is no dystopia, it is always about crisis, but crisis is something that will come to an end. Maybe in 30, in 40 years, maybe it will take some more time, like 100 and 200 years, but still it will come to some end. It means that we should remember more about the positive image of the future. I love a lot a very old joke, which is significant for science fiction. It is a situation from Ilf book. So after everybody thought that happiness will come after the invention of radio. Now the radio is invented, but no happiness still in the world. So this is utopia. And same we thought about space. As soon as we have a breakthrough in the space, we'll become happy. But no. So each time we need to talk about this punk approach, cyberpunk or other types of punk. And radio is already invented, but still we need to live with it and to do something with it, though we have not become happy. And so this is the right approach. What else is important here? We have always been the second science fiction of the world. And the 60s, for 3 years, we have been the first. Now we are not even the first, the second, the third, not even the fourth. And the decline of science fiction is the objective reality for us, but still now we have the very first pioneers of the new generation of science fiction writers, and I hope that there will be new books in Russian. Maybe I haven't found them yet, but for now the situation is not good. It's 5-0 after the Western countries, and we lose completely. I know that we could use the following time to work with it, and for now this is one of the most difficult crises to overcome for Russia. Thank you, Sergey. I always think whether I need to give you the floor at the beginning of discussion or at the end. So as for the pioneers and bookshops, it's not 5-0, and I think we are in a better situation. We scored more goals than 0 because quite a big audience in our country is now given to Masanton and Lucicine, so thousands, hundreds of books sold. So now I'd like to address to the representative of science fiction, Igor Chengdu. So what is the success of Chinese science fiction and fantasy, and how does the government support this sphere? So the Mr. Moderator has just noticed that this is a very successful sphere for us. He also said that we develop science fiction a lot. And the development of science fiction in China has been quite active from the very beginning. And I would also say that this is where I could address to the whole process of the development of science fiction in China. Before the creation of New China, there were some processes going on. They were quite progressive, and of course, they contributed to the creation of such ideas to such authors. Because why was it happening? Because the society needed to have some values, some ideals to strive for. We had a number of new books appearing, and this is when we started to work more on this sphere, and sci-fi writers were interested in finding a new way for their society through their books. And now we can find some books written before 1900. When we see them, we try to follow the logic of the authors and of the ideas which were aimed at opening the world for our people. And of course, there were some traditions that maybe were lost, but in 1949, we created New China, and we could even feel the impact of the Soviet authors on ours. Why? Because in China, the impact, the ideas of the Soviet Union were quite strong, and science fiction became functional at this point. It worked for the development of education in China, and the books of Chinese sci-fi authors were also under the impact of Soviet newspapers, magazines. I would also point out the fact that scientific magazines of Soviet Union also had influence on the books of our authors. Of course, there was some time when we were developing quite actively our sci-fi sphere, and it was in demand by the society. It helped our young people and children to develop. And I would like to highlight that back then we could not say that we had a very good level of education in all parts of the countries, but this is where through these books the young people could get new knowledge and new experience, let's say so. So these books fulfilled their mission, and Lucy Xin and other Chinese writers they created this world of education for the young people of China, for the kids, and it was a good platform for the development of sci-fi sphere. And during this process, all the fields of the industries in China experienced the impact of the Soviet Union.
And I also would like to note that at that time, all the people, scientists, they really contributed to the development of that process, and simple people started getting interested in science and technology. So that was just a popular science stage. And then there was a very good development of science fiction in the country. And later in the Chinese society, we had certain changes. We had the policy of openness and the reforms, And then we started asking questions. So what should be leading for us? The part which is science or the part which is science fiction? And then science fiction, where does it belong? How deep should it be? Yeah, because a lot of readers and a lot of writers, they actually wanted to somehow show some of their share their ideas, and they started different types of discussions, and we had those discussions for about 10 years. And if you're interested, we have a specialized book regarding development of Chinese science fiction. You can read it, you can have a look. And I would like to say the following, that at that period of time, I am not sure whether people present here are aware of that situation, how do they know about the development of that stage, but we would like to note that at that time, we had the science fiction, which was manifesting itself in such a way that it was popularizing science, but also it was getting from top to bottom. And that's different magazines were published, and those magazines were like platforms to disseminate science fiction works. And if we talk about 1983 to 2010, we can say that at that time there was just the only way to disseminate science fiction. That was just the exchange of different magazines, and Liu Cixin is our main author of that period, and also we can say that there was some dissemination of that information using different science fiction magazines, or just engineers were reading those magazines. They became aware of those ideas reflected in science fiction works. And if we discuss this idea, we can say that some of the science fiction novels were full of other plots, and more and more people started reading those books, those magazines, and this also this fact that so many magazines were published, it helped science fiction to become more and more popular. And then we organized the symposium regarding science fiction. We invited people from NASA. We invited Russian cosmonauts, Russian space scientists, and they became real icon figures for our people. And that was the time when China already started developing its space industry, and the Chinese government actually stimulated our young people, provided incentive for them to participate in that work. Also, I'd like to draw attention to the fact that young people, children, they became interested in science fiction. And also, when we had final exams in high school, we included more and more issues regarding space exploration. And about 2 million people read science fiction every month in China. We have more and more readers. Thank you. Thank you for this answer. Very short question requiring a short answer. Is there state policy regarding science fiction? Yes or no? There is no specific policy of creation of science fiction. There is no specific policy, but there is a certain field of responsibility regarding technological development of the whole society. But here we're talking about popularizing knowledge, and that indirectly is part of ideological policy in this respect. It seems that the global science fiction, if it's not in crisis, but at least it's captured by expectations regarding apocalypse. The reasons could be different, but the most popular movies, books, franchises, they're all about end of the world. From your point of view, what could be done, or is it possible to have a scenario when we don't just have science fiction about something positive, some optimistic plans of the development of this world, but those books, could they become popular and commercially successful? What could be done for that? Is it possible?
Is the microphone okay? This is a very interesting question, and actually I've been thinking very much about that myself, because personally I'm inspired as an author from Robert Quaglia, who was my idol when I was a teenager. Then he became a friend of mine even, and he was one of the first to actually see the problem of technology having a dark side, so having a negative turnout that would be unexpected. Let's remember that in the 40s, in the golden age of science fiction, so-called, science fiction was very positive, and then it became more, let's say, skeptical about the possibility of a positive outcome, and Quaglia was one of the first ones who actually started to doubt about a happy future because of technology. So actually most of my life and also my writings were in a way influenced by this kind of pessimistic view. I mean, optimistic approach, but with pessimistic conceptualization about the future. However, now it has become, as has been just said, basically a stereotype. So especially in the West, now the concept of apocalypse and even dystopia is now prominent. Actually, I would say that now it's very popular in the West to write dystopias. I would even say sometimes when we joke in this field that everybody's writing their own dystopia, which is kind of insane. So they write science fiction, dystopian scenarios, only dystopian scenarios. The funny thing, and now we go a little bit to reality, of course this is only my personal view, I think that in the West the West is leaning a little bit towards a kind of dystopia. I mean, this is our perception of some of us in the West. And as we slide into this kind of dystopia step by step, we realize that there's more and more people writing about dystopia, but they don't write about dystopia the society is falling into. They write about different dystopias. So I started to call it a kind of dystopian escapism. So you start to figure out catastrophes of the future, which distract you from the catastrophes of that you are falling a victim of, because maybe you don't want to see some trends of your society, and so you lose yourself into a pessimistic nightmare about disasters which will not happen, because then most of the dystopians which are imagined, they don't happen. And then we have seen another trend in the West, I mean, at least I saw it, which is the fact that some very popular dystopian books, like, for example, 1984 by George Orwell, but also, in a way, The Brave New World by Huxley, which was actually not a real dystopian world, it was a utopian world turned into a sort of dystopia, which were written basically for warning people about possible totalitarian twists of society. So they were basically positive. I mean, they were showing a negative society in order to warn you so that you don't take that way. Basically, we joke about that in Italy, not all of us, but some of us. We joke about the fact that instead of a warning, this book has been taken by a manual of reference. You know, so like follow these instructions to build society. So some of the tricks sometimes has been taken as a manual, as instructions on how to let's say, trap the freedom of the people. So in this sense, you know, I start to think that imagining a horrible future starts in a way to become unethical. So, but because for the reason that it has never been taken as a warning, it's more likely to be taken as instruction. And on the other side, it becomes often like a dystopian escapism. So after a while, your mind frames the dystopia as something imaginary, and so they will not recognize it as real when it becomes real. So this is something which has very much to do with psychology, with sociology, and I think that it's about time, in general, to try to do the real revolutionary thing in science fiction imagination, which is to look for the utopian model. So we have to look for the perfect society, which doesn't mean that we will realize. We have to try to imagine positive futures. Because to imagine negative futures, I saw it in the West, it's often becomes self-fulfilling prophecies. And by now, I'm leading a lot of talk shows on the internet about current affairs. So, but of course, I'm a science fiction writer. So every time I have come out with some very funny dystopian idea, which I say it with humor on the talk show, because I'm joking, all the people that are in the talk show are now used to say, don't say that, they will copy you, they will do it for real, you know. So sometimes to give them bad ideas is not a good idea. Anyway, I think that I'm very optimistic about the fact that we will have a positive science fiction. I think that China is a very big hope in this field, and the rise of Chinese science fiction is something that captured my attention already several years ago. And I think it was 5 years ago I made a video, especially on that, on the Wandering Earth film, because I thought it was a very beautiful example, a very beautiful case study to see a new trend in action. Later I would even dedicate an entire chapter in my latest book about the Wandering Earth and its implications, because I think that this was a very important example. I think the only one which actually I know so far in the cinema of, let's say, multipolar approach on science fiction. There were a lot of very interesting aspects. Now I won't discuss them in detail. I dedicated like a 20 minutes or long video just only to discuss it. But there were many things in the structure of the story, in the characterization of the characters, and in many other details, which actually were violating a lot of stereotypes that we were used to in science fiction, in cinematographic science fiction before. And the film had a lot of success. So this was very important also. So you could actually start to tell a story about the future in a completely different way. For example, in the film, you don't have a hero, but you have a collective solution of the problem, you know. So the Western filmography is always based on the romantic figure of a single hero who saves the day. This was a collective approach, and instead of defeating an enemy, it was turning around the problem, because actually, you know, the Wandering Earth will avoid the problem, you know, which is a more wise solution than to defeat in a war, you understand? So it was very philosophically interesting, and in a way could transmit, you know, a lot of positive values in an entertaining way, you know. And I speak about cinema because, of course, cinema is the one that arrives to the majority of people. Of course, I'm personally a writer, so I write books, and of course, personally, I prefer books 1,000 times more than films. But as an impact to society, cinematography is very, very important. If we want to have an impact on society with our works and have a positive impact on the future of our societies, then it's exactly in the field of cinematography that the new authors have to focus very much, and also frame not only the stories but also in the meta communication and all the symbologies, which then can be embedded in the book, which can affect positively or negatively people according to the intentions.
Quaglia, большое спасибо.
Thank you so much. A short question requiring a very short answer. Today, will the people go to the movie theater to watch science fiction utopia? And could it be the same success as The Wandering Earth today?
I think the content is not important in determining if the people will go to the cinema. It's the frame which is important, the meta-communication. So if the frame is correctly built, the grammar of the film, the grammar of the story, the meta-communication, then the people will swallow every content. You can have the people swallow poison or, beautiful things. It depends on the frame. So the quality of the representation. If you get the right frame, you can have them watching a beautiful utopia and enjoy it.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you so much. Mr. Lob, well, I think that you are different from all of us. And here, we're not just talking about our clothing here, but first of all, because you're an architect. And the discussions, when we discuss books, movies, games, you participate in this discussion as an architect who is creating the buildings of tomorrow. And we have a lot of new buildings in Moscow, you know that, and quite often developers, they use this ad, we're building the future. I think they haven't seen your work, and they are misled. They don't understand what the future is. How do you create the future? What do you include in it?
Fundamentally, today I want to tell you a story about my life and my journey as an architect. Architects, we are in a way like science fiction authors. Although we don't write the books, I think we are creating the scenes and the worlds that possibly is a kind of science fiction. And I think along the way, when we're making every new building, we are actually writing a chapter in this science fiction of the world. And what makes it more interesting than just writing fiction is that with science fiction, with every building and architecture we create, each one is like a new technology that can create a more interesting and better world for all of us. So the question is, why did I get so inspired by science fiction? So I produced some slides here to show you, if I can. So I remember that when I was a child, I really loved movies. Although Roberto says books are better than movies, I really love movies. And several movies really moved me when I was less than 10 years old. One was the first time I watched Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. And the moment when HAL 2000 turned up, something went in my head. I said, my God, the architecture around us, whether it's a spaceship or a building, can actually become our friend, can become our enemy, can also become our assistant. And this was back in the 1970s. And immediately, it changed my perception about what we can design and build. And also in the movie, the notion that, you know, architecture is just on the ground as a building was entirely changed for me as a child when I see spaceships up in space. You know, to think that buildings do not have to be on gravity, they can be floating in outer space. And now this is true, right? We have the International Space Station, and soon we'll have space resorts and space hotels, and we can go to space. And architects like me, we want to design those things. We want to design that science fiction becoming real. And also now you discussed about the dystopia. Of course, movies like Blade Runner was really a wake-up call for me about, wow, you know, there's a responsibility to this science fiction where, well, if we see it in the movies and we see it as a little bit unpleasant, maybe architecture has a responsibility to be a, you know, ethical and good for human beings science fiction. Then, when I was around 15 years old, I watched this movie, Tron, which was produced by Disney. And again, it blew my mind, changed my perception of architecture. Architecture was like concrete, steel, and glass, cathedrals, skyscrapers. But this movie introduced the notion of digital inner space, virtual reality, another kind of architecture. And now we have companies like Meta creating augmented reality glasses, and we can stay in a game for hours and hours and be immersed in it. This is also a new kind of architecture from the science fiction. So all of this influenced me a lot. And perhaps the biggest, the biggest influence of all was when I was 6 years old. I was taken by my parents to watch Star Wars, and I saw this. My God, I thought, this is so cool. This is where science fiction has awoken me up to the possibility that we can design the planet, we can design the moon, we can design something so huge that we cannot even comprehend the size. So it broke all of my preconceptions about scale and about possibility. What an incredible inspiration for me. So moving ahead into my career, this really has manifested in my designs. Those Death Stars from Star Wars inspired me to create this city, which is a mega city that is decentralized, totally self-sufficient, housing 3 million people, living in giant automated technospheres, which are inspired by the Death Star, with energy fields, water, agriculture, open space, in between. And so, in many ways, what happened for me 45 years ago, implanted in my mind, was the science fiction. Now, myself, as an architect, I'm making that science fiction real and testing it in the real world. And it's a very powerful inspiration. It really is a very powerful inspiration for me. And then moving ahead, sorry, the slides are not moving. Can somebody move my slide? Science fiction, move my slide, okay. So the Death Star is now a structure which houses about 40,000 people. It's going to be built. It's using robots and factories to build it. It's the world's most efficient building. It operates like a planet, and it creates a city that is entirely self-sufficient. And who would have thought that architecture can get inspiration from science fiction, literally? I think another one that really inspired me in science fiction was this movie called Silent Running. Has anyone seen this movie? Silent Running? No? I highly recommend it because this is science fiction that will make you cry, okay? So it's not dystopia. It's actually a hopeful message. In this movie, it talks about the planet Earth is dying, and spaceships are sent out to space, carrying the nature of our planet, hopefully to find a refuge somewhere in space so that we can regrow. Along the way, many problems happen, and the astronaut, the cosmonaut, has to sacrifice his life so that the nature of our planet can continue. When I saw this, I was around 8 years old, and I was crying after this movie because I was taught by this science fiction about how valuable our planet really is. And so this inspiration led me to projects like the next slide I'm going to show you, right? Which is a new kind of city that preserves our nature. This project is in Saudi Arabia, and it's called The Parting of the Red Seas. Can somebody turn my slide for me? Yeah. And what we do in this project is we create from the seabed of the Red Sea, by parting it like Moses in the Bible, and create fertile land from the desert. And this city is all about re-greenifying Saudi Arabia. So the citizens of this project, the city, is not just people, but all of the plants, all of the animals, all of the insects, all of the other inhabitants of our planet which are valuable. And I look back to when I was a child and I saw those silent running movie. I think it was inspired by that. Last but not least, ideas about how we protect our city comes from so many inspirations in science fiction. It talks about how we can create things which are anti-gravity, things which we can float, again, can have some, and creating new shelters as cities that are almost like UFOs flying over, creating shade over the desert, and once again making green and fertile land for people. I really believe that without science fiction, why would I have these ideas today? I really cannot believe I created these myself. I want to be a science fiction author, but the best I can do is maybe I'm a science fiction architect. Thank you.
Большое спасибо. Короткий вопрос.
So a very short question to you. So from your professional point of view, are you able to name a film, a movie, where they depict one of the most beautiful and the most comfortable cities of the world that responds to the criteria of today and of tomorrow? So what would you recommend to see?
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. The most beautiful, let me just think. Yeah, there's a movie called The Island. And the movie talks about this fictional place where all of these people are waiting to go to. It's a beautiful island, sun, sea, beaches, everything. And, but in fact, all of the people who are waiting to go to the island, they're actually clones for medical use. So the most beautiful island in science fiction movie was actually a lie that is conning all of these people. So that's what I can think of.
Большое спасибо. Я знаю, что мы сегодня вечером.
So yes, thank you very much. I'm sure that we will watch this movie today. And now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Efimov. So I have the honor to represent the interests of Rosatom Corporation, to represent Sberbank. So there is something that makes our companies very close to each other. We represent the companies which form the technological landscape of tomorrow. We put lots of effort into technologies that will give fruit tomorrow or even the day after tomorrow. So in your opinion, how does science fiction influence science and its development in Sberbank, for example, and how does it influence the creation of new technologies? Thank you very much for this wonderful question. So I'd like to start with the same idea as you had. I'd like to ask our audience. So maybe somebody will answer my question. So dear friends, the last year, your kids, has anybody of your kids read any of science fiction books last year? If it's not, if you don't have kids, answer for yourselves. So we have found something common. We have this love for science fiction, and I love science fiction as 30% of our audience, as Sergey, so I love it. And I'm here not because Sberbank sent me to carry out this function, to represent them here. I'm here because I want to be here, and I'd like to answer the question asked by Andrey. So science fiction is interesting because it's great when you are 12. And it's the only thing which is good about science fiction. So if your kids read science fiction, everything's good about science fiction in the country. If they don't, the situation is bad. And this is the only thing that we need to remember. As for dystopias and utopias, of course, from the position of Winston Smith, the character of 1984, this is dystopia. But from the point of view of the Big Brother, is it a utopia or what? He is fighting with the people who do not let him govern the country and the planet. So what is a utopia for one, a dystopia for another? And it depends on our point of view and on our position. Now I'd like to agree with Sergey. He said something very true. He said that science fiction is never a driver for development, but why are we here then? Why are we discussing this topic? Because there are some very important particularities here, some details. My first science fiction novel I wrote at the age of 12, or no, at the age of 9, not 12. And thank God I stopped there, so maybe I deprived the humanity of one more writer, and maybe I will voice some common idea. Science fiction author and writer is paid for preventing not to open the wrong door. Still, people do open these wrong doors, but they need to be prevented. They need to be warned against it. Another important topic that touches upon science fiction authors is, for example, Vernon Winch is the representative of the university. He's also a science fiction writer, and there are other writers who have other jobs and who became sci-fi authors after doing some other things. So can you call somebody? So, okay, this was a chemist, Fred Horrell. He was an astronomer. Boris Strugatsky was astronomer as well, so they were scientists and they understood the ideas that they were depicting in their books. So this was allowed us to get rid of the imperialistic process in order to prove something important. So this is the second idea and the second goal of science fiction. So I do not want to talk about scientific magazines right now, but I'll tell you the truth. One of my favorite books of the last century is The American Phantom Fleet. Is there anybody who read this book? No. Yes, good. So there is somebody, but you need to read it in English, but it is a very wonderful book because it talks about the future war between the US and China. And I do recommend you to read it because it is written from the point of view of a technologist, of a technical guy. Maybe Sergey read it? No. So both authors, both writers, ex-Pentagon employees who turned into writers. And there is also another trend in science fiction. So we have soldiers, ex-war contingent who deal with science fiction right now. So thank you for helping me here. What else am I about to tell you? Sci-fi is something we need because this is a very unique genre of literature, and that helps us to overcome our fear before the future. And everybody is afraid of it, and we know that the future will come, and science fiction helps us do something very important that other articles and magazines are unable to do. And so it helps us not to get ready to some kind of a future, but to adapt to the future, because it provides us with a fantasy. And this is the second point that Sergey mentioned. It leaves us a desire to make experiments, and experiments is the most important tool that the scientists have. Everything we have is about experiments. If they do not make experiments, they are authors of some kind of research articles, but they are not scientists. Maybe drawing a line here, I would say that we often concentrate a lot on Soviet sci-fi books. I think that is not the right way, because Soviet sci-fi is about Strugatsky, and that's it. We cannot add anything here. Maybe for some time we have been leaders in this sphere, but I wouldn't say so. And I would tell you something else here. So I would like to quote the cruiser, the vessel of the second class of that was going in the space beside the stars. So everybody understand that this is about sci-fi fiction. This is about science fiction. So everything which is in between of this quote of Lem, written 70 years ago, is not about science fiction. This is about some other entertainment genres. And I think that is it. I hope I answered your question, Andrey. So I would like to highlight once again, so sci-fi is not the driver for development. This is only a mirror of what's going on. As soon as we start sending 15 billion 15% of GDP to innovations, we will get the best science fiction in the world, maybe better than the Chinese have, but they are trying to be better. Of course, while we only send 1.5% into research and development, we have the score of 5-0, and I agree that we do not spend as much money as the Chinese people on science and on research. So this is the point. So this is quite pessimistic ideas from the left coming. And my question to you is the following. Am I getting it right that you say no to the separate functioning of science fiction? You give it only service functions. Is it true? Is it the fact, and you would like to the kids to get the education first to work with science fiction?
Когда вам 12 лет. Это главная мотивация.
The best science fiction is when you are 12 years old. This is the main motive. The big mistake is to think that science fiction is predicting anything. It's just a mirror, like Jules Verne. He was just reading research. Stanislav Lem read several science articles a day. They don't invent anything. Science fiction writers predicted this, predicted that. It's a myth. They just read about it. I remember then Prokhov was asked, what do you think about laser? Yes, Wells is a great writer, but he is not really related to any laser invention. And Philip Dick, well, he was not the one who invented robots and who invented computers. No, we're talking about the history of the humanity. Don't read science fiction as the opportunity to read about something. If you want to read about something technological, you can get the book Sum of Technologies by Stanislav Lem, but it's not a science fiction book, no. Sergey, well, I wanted to note that there were authors that were really involved with the future, and it's a very interesting criterion. The real focus is something that didn't happen, or it's something that you don't feel is a focus. A very good example. Lem wrote Solaris in 1964. In 2020, we realized that he described the world where the thinking is created, which is 10 times greater than human thinking. This is a focus. This is the plan of work. This is a very, very good focus. And if you read something in a science fiction book which seems to be idiotic and not clear, non-related, that's when you got a small part of the focus. But Albert is right that in science fiction you don't find it more often than in other kinds of literature. Well, I cannot agree that Solaris is good for working with AI. I didn't say anything about AI, no. The best book of person-to-machine communication is Little Boy by Strugatsky Brothers. And you can get what we have today. Yeah, they didn't even predict their development. No, I didn't say that I was speaking about AI, but I was talking about development of intelligence. And we have the Q1, that's dead matter, Q2, live matter, and then intelligent. Is Q4 possible? Yes. Solaris is Q4. Okay, we'll see what we're going to read after we watch the movie tonight. Thank you so much. I think it was difficult to predict that huge commercial success of Atomic Art. Who played that game and who saw just in YouTube or in VK how it looks like, and it looks great. And there is a great visual video game. It's alternative utopia, but then it's a revolt of the machines anyway. And then for several months, I've been approached by people who create games, computer games, and we discuss the possible variant of a positive video game without shooting each other, without destruction, without fights. And frankly, what is stopping me from getting involved in that project is the perception that we could create a beautiful video game, but it won't have commercial success. I would like to introduce Alexey Fedoseev, president of the Association of the Clubs and the leader of the platform called Birloga. Alexey, is it possible to create commercially successful positive game? Short answer is no. And I will try to answer what was asked by Albert. Well, 12 years old, it's a wonderful age, a wonderful premise, but I have to recall a wonderful story by Stephen King, who was in the movie theater and learned that the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first satellite, and children and young people, they are co-communicators of the writers. And even if the writers write for adults, they still influence younger generation. And one of them is going to write horror literature. One of them is going to become an engineer. So the communications that happen with the next generation, it's highly important. And science fiction, different utopias, different science fiction worlds, what gets outside just a group of separate authors, that's highly important, a highly important task. And in modern world, we can see this contradiction. On the one hand, we have this great art, authors, culture, wonderful movies, TV series. This is the new format of conveying interesting ideas. So they are rooted in science, in philosophy, but there are also horizontal worlds and groups that create content which is far from science fiction, but it's part of sort of science fiction. And this is quite a live space, but it's real terrible things are going on inside there. But we can have this gap, generation gap, and a lot of young people, they see video games and movies as the main source of thinking about the world, the primary source of getting impressions and inspiration. And there are certain universes created, such as Warhammer 40,000, and they are quite topical for decades. And actually, they're not positive at all. They have the core of very tough conflict, very tough social criticism, similar to what was written by Sheckley. So this is just the irony of today reflected in fantasy, reflected in science fiction. That's what young people buy. That's what young people believe is important. Is it possible to use that space to create something positive and something complicated? Here, it's highly important to discover certain just space of independent action of young people. What can they do? How could they get established? There is a large group of young people that are in cybersports, some creative activities. When they create their own worlds, they have new communities that form different groups of changes that change the policy inside. And it seems to me that science fiction hasn't opened this potential completely, because when you look at great philosophy and then you think about great challenges, when you remember the classics of the past, well, to convey it as an idea of simple cooperation, simple creation, and atomic heart is a professional product that lowered the mark. Instead, well, they decided to have just an action movie. You can play it, but it's impossible to provide any answers. But young people, that's interesting for them to try something and answer this, face this challenge of socialism. And a lot of young people, they feel that they want to discuss it. What kind of format could be provided as the young people's answer? How could science fiction writer accept that answer of young people? I believe that the future of such games is the future of the platforms of cooperative creation. And that's where the science fiction writers are ready to use some much simpler vocabulary in order to allow more people into that space. There will be a lot of some useless thing, like a useless foam, but it will be possible to get some new formats of cooperative organization, cooperative creation, and some interesting new ideas that could be created as some works of tomorrow. And the game, which is different from the movies, a game is unique. Game is unique as a genre because this way you get involved, you participate. When your action is part of new history, this is the history of how you participated in certain games as a unique participant. And that gives more, requires more openness from the author. And it requires a certain openness to creative cooperation. That's what I wanted to say. Do you play games? Of course. So the trend of recent years, when you can use different alternative ways, you could kill participants or you could use the pacifist way. Which way do you choose? Well, it's difficult to answer here because we have the society which is rediscovering major narratives. Young people also discover new narratives. But also we are also rediscovering violence because the modern world is not telling us that everything could be done peacefully. There is no end of history, and a lot depends on my situation when you give me the sword. Friends, we have a little bit more time for questions from the audience. Raise your hands and ask your questions. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Olga Motiva. I'm from Saratov. I'm a writer and a public figure, and I would like to ask our guests. I liked the addresses of our foreign guests. Tell me, please, from your point of view now, and I can see that we have Mr. Volodin, Speaker of the Parliament, and his ideas, his dreams get our people involved, our region involved, and sometimes I wrote my novella inspired by his optimistic ideas. Are there any leaders in your countries, maybe political leaders, maybe some popular figures in the society that inspire you to write something, or some politicians, maybe public figures who inspire you to create something in architecture or in literature?
Yes, but they're all dead. There are very many people of my country which has inspired me and continue to inspire me. They're all dead. Of course, I have people that inspire me, but not necessarily my country today.
Спасибо. Госпожа Xue.
Monsieur? No.
I don't want to be, because there are some very good exceptions. So there is a very good philosopher in Italy, Andrea Zoc, who is really inspiring. I must say, yes, I have to recognize there are a few that are very inspiring, yes.
In China, actually, well, politics doesn't well, politicians don't interfere with science fiction literature. Deng Xiaoping, you remember, he paid so much attention to technological development, and he inspired our authors to look for new plots, new ideas, especially when we started the policy of being open. So the place for China in the world of the future, all those questions asked by politicians helped us to just use the potential. And after the three-body problem, when the author was recognized at the highest possible level and it was appreciated by the leader of our country, yes, it's an inspiration.
Cool question. I'd like to answer it like this. I'm very lucky. I've been traveling around the world, and I've been working in many different countries. And I think the people that inspire me the most are the people who have dreams. Everybody has dreams in different parts of the world. Poor people I meet in India are dreaming of having a very nice house. People in Africa are dreaming to have new telecommunication. And when I travel and see people with dreams, I think it inspires me about science fiction, because maybe this is the kind of vitamin, or this is the kind of nutrition that we can give to them so that they can follow their dreams. So my inspiration is 6.5 billion people on this planet. Yeah.
Спасибо, господин Лоу.
Could I add, I would like to remind you, we love science fiction. If you have the lined piece of paper, write across the lines, not along the lines. This is the answer. Introduce yourself. And my name is Arina Kodakova. I am from the Institute of Physics and Technology of Moscow. I would like to ask all of you, what is the future going to be, that when we have to inspire the new generation to do something? We are adults. We watch all the changes in the world, not usually welcome changes, but anyway, what should we use to inspire the new generation, something wonderful in the future? How can we Yes, I think Sergey is going to start our pessimistic part of the panel. No, I'm a super activist. I'm not a pessimist. But my answer is this following. There is a famous thing that's your just when you are given, you are born again, so it's a training. And when you are born again, physically it's very hard. And he is asked, is the world welcome or is the world friendly? People answer differently, but this is the basis for their future just mental development and mental treatment. Sometimes people say, I don't care whether it's friendly or not friendly. It's a very interesting world, and about 10 to 12% of people answer like that. The world that is expecting us is going to be extremely interesting. Everything else, well, it's not that important. As Albert said, well, the world which seems to be a utopian world, other people would see it as a dystopian world.
Secondly, this world will not only be very interesting, it will be also very complicated, and to exist in it, to live in it, we will have to become complicated ourselves, complicated as we used to be. But then, as the life was getting easier, we also learned to become simple. We need to become sophisticated, and this is a very interesting work and very interesting task. And the third point is that this will be the world built on conscience and thinking, as our world is built on information and technique. And those who can think over, and together with other people and AI, will have all the necessary advantages. So we will have to develop our thinking. Will it be a utopia? We don't know. Maybe yes or no. Will it be a dystopia? For those who will not be able to fit this world, it will be a frightening place, because such people will be given cognitive tasks that they will have to deal with not only during the exam but every day, and this will be a nightmare. But for those who are interested in it, they will be happy to live in this world. So Sergey already said everything, me too. So if you have a lined paper, write across the lines, not along the lines, because in the corporations today, we value those who can say no, or those who can say, I will do something, even if others do not believe in me. And such opinion is so precious, so valued, because not very many people have the opportunity to say no and to act in a different way. What can we do? What can we tell you? You are so young that it is difficult to you to motivate those who are even younger. But the only thing we can do for the kids is to show something to them with our own examples, with our own deeds, our own actions. No books your kids will read if you do not read them yourselves. Your kids will not do science if you are not interested in it. Your kids will not work if you do not work. So each time, if you're a blogger, for example, your kids will not be able to produce something. They will be bloggers as well. If you do not do something for the economy, they will not do anything for it neither. So this is what we need to do. We need to work and to show with our own examples something to our kids. So, Mr. Lau.
How do we inspire the young generation, right? So I'm still young. I need inspiration. Maybe I would say it like this. I think actually within a very short time, many of the things that are fundamentally true about the world will change. What are they? Time will change, gravity will change, scale will change, our systems will change, everything will change. And the motivation for the young people is that they are going to be the explorers of this future. It's their world, and it's all going to be different. What an exciting time to live. It's an exciting time to live. So how they explore, what they will do in their lives after these rules are gone, is a beautiful canvas that they can create. So I think that is an inspiration.
Большое спасибо, госпожа Xue.
Monsieur.
从另一个角度来回答这个问题，首先呢，在座的各位请回忆一下，就是大家觉得说，像人工智能 AI， 还有虚拟现实 VR，以及元宇宙 Metaverse 这些词汇是从什么时候开始兴起的？应该是最近2-3年这样的一个时间，就是它大量的涌入到大众的视野里面。但实际上呢，这些概念都是科幻可能讨论了几十年。甚至70-80年的这样的，就是已经讨论的非常泛滥的这样的一个主题。那么为什么它会被拎到现在这个阶段进行一个大众化呢？是因为我们的社会放缓了。刚才有嘉宾在说，觉得科幻无法指导 现实生活，它无法成为社会发展的动力。但我觉得这个呢是一个阶段性的一个结论。但是从现在来看呢，就是当我们的社会发展放缓，我们的科学进步和技术进步都放缓的时候，科幻是有可能会指导我们的现实的技术进步的方向这样子的。那么像那个很多的互联网大厂，包括美国的，包括中国的，都会请科幻作家作为顾问，那么会把科幻曾经的一些概念拿出来大家去探讨。中国有一位科幻研究的博士，他说过一句话，他说任何人都可以想象飞机，只有科幻作家能够想象飞机里程积分卡。对，所以在这种情况下，我觉得就是在科技飞速发展的现在吧，科幻能够帮助我们的年轻人在技术迅速变化的背景下，找到未来的方向和思考的契机。好，谢谢。
Большое спасибо, господин Quaglia.
I think that probably it's a very personal approach to this issue, how to inspire generation in general, which is everybody's use in this world, the real question. If you are a person dominated by problems of your ego, probably you're not fit to inspire anyone. People who actually are committed, to do something useful, they will find different ways. As for me personally, I have an approach a little bit like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, so to split personalities. On my science fiction writer personality, I try to stretch my imagination beyond the boundaries of what I consider to have been thought before. So actually, I often also violate some mental taboos, in my extrapolation, writing very weird things, And this could be a sort of a fitness for people, they can be inspired or terrorized, it depends on perspective. But some people will have an advantage. They have some, elasticity in their mind because they stretch their minds following my crazy thoughts. But on the other side, I have a second identity, be it Mr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, which is actually an analyst of geopolitical situation, more journalistic vision. And I'm very active on this field too. And in this case, I'm doing the exact opposite. So I'm trying to shrink all what, the world tells me into a reality check, which actually try to identify exactly what's going on, And of course, this is also part of the activity of my, let's say, as a public figure, in talk shows and so. So in this case, it can be of inspiration. I've just realized that a lot of people feel my use in doing that, to understand what's going on. So you see, on one side, expand imagination, on the other side, to find out what's going on, because both things actually are necessary. So this is my personal way. I cannot say this is a way others should follow. But the very important thing is the intention, if your intention is to be useful or if your intention is to have a big ego.
Я полностью.
So I totally agree with our colleagues. Maybe I will say it again, but with a different accent. I think it is important to show the world of the future as an open world, not yet filled with different institutions where everything has been decided for yourself, and it should be more of like a construction site where the world is something that you can be architect in, and you can create something new, something more interesting. And this is something that the young people can do. For now, they feel like everything is already settled for them. So we need them to show them that they can do something for themselves. So we have only 1 minute left. It's very difficult to draw a line to today's discussion. At the very beginning, I was asking 2 questions for myself. Is it possible to have a positive track for the development of sci-fi? And if it is possible to manage this track in order not to kill the art. We understand that fantasy is sometimes difficult for the people. Somebody says that it plays a service function. Somebody says that science fiction is something that should be an instrument to to talk to technologists of tomorrow. But in any case, the science fiction of today is something difficult. But if you want to feel optimistic, if you want to create, to do the better world, do architecture. So let's give a round of applause to our speakers. And once again, thank our moderator. So I think it was a cute time that we spent together. Thank you. So dear friends, thank you very much for your participation. Now we are asking you to scan a QR code that you can see on the screen and answer the questions of the survey. We do need your opinion. Thank you. Dear friends, if you are still here, please scan this QR code and give your mark to the discussion. Thank you.